Marcus Aurelius Antoninus Bassianus, filius severi imperatoris, in politiam blandus, ingeniosus et affabilis. Egressus autem politiam, adeo mores immutavit truculentior factus, ut eum quem puerum noverant multi esse non crederent. Contra vero frater eius Geta, fuit vir probus moderatus et lenis, tractans honestoria studia, placidus et humanus in optimos quosque. Conabatur mater conciliare discordes fratres, sed nihil proficiebat cum fraternum odium indies glisceret, et paratae in Syriae veneno non procederent, quod uterque esset curae ac diligentiae singularis in cibo potuque somendo. Tandem Antoninus erupto fratris cubiculo, nihil eum tale expectantem supra matris pectus multo udantem sanguine, saevus obtruncat. Postea enormem militibus largitionem tam in nummis quam in annona donat, cuius magnitudine electi, vulgati iam caede fratis, unum illum declarant imperatorem. De hinc Romam rediens, saevit in fratris domesticos, et in quoscumque qui opibus exclebant, ut bona eorum raperit, occidit etiam Papianum iure consultum, quod parricidium excusare noluerit. Per ossum autem se sentiens relicta Roma, ad ripas se cesit Danubi, ubi Germanos sibi associavit, habituque Germanicos saepe incesit, sicut et cum in Macedoniam venisit, gestavit habitum Macedonicum, et Alexandro simile se fecit. Cumque passim saevisit in Alexandrinos et Partorum populum in Mesopotamia per Martialem centurionem pugione per fossos est, dum sub Legacula deduceret, ventrisque oneris subulevando intenderet, sed Martialis a custodibus corporibus dum fugam mulitur missibilis est confusus. Vixerat autem Bassianus annis quaturgentitria imperavitque annis sex. Marcus Aurelius Antoninus Bassianus, who is later nicknamed Caracalla, son of Emperor Severus, was in his boyhood charming, intelligent, and affable. But after departing his childhood, his manners had changed so much, becoming so much more brutal, that many people did not believe him to be the same person they had known as a child. But, on the other hand, his brother Geta was a man of integrity, more moderate and gentle, taking himself to more honorable studies, most calm and humane towards all the best men. Their mother always tried to reconcile the discordant brothers, but to no avail. As their brotherly hatred grew, the daily plots they prepared for each other by poison were of no avail, because each one was singularly careful and most diligent in their selection of food and drink. But at length Antonius burst into his brother Geta's room. His brother was expecting nothing of the sort, and he savagely beheaded him, with his mother's breast flowing over with his brother's blood. Afterwards he gave to his soldiers such an enormous prize, both in money and provisions, and enticed by the magnitude of this bribe, when the murder of his brother had become well known, they declared Carcalla the sole emperor. Thence, returning to Rome, he raged against his brother's household, against all of those who excelled in wealth, in order to seize their goods. He had the jurist Papianus put to death, because he alone refused to excuse Caracalla's parricide. But then, feeling himself to be losing his mind, he left Rome and took himself to the banks of the Danube, where he went about associating with Germans, often dressing himself in Germanic garb, just as when he had similarly gone to Macedonia, he went native among the Macedonians and made himself look like Alexander. And when he had raged far and wide against the Alexandrian and Parthian people in Mesopotamia, he was pierced by a dagger by his own centurion Martialis, just as he was removing his undergarments and making ready to relieve his bowels. But this Martialis, when attempting himself to flee, was pierced by javelins of his bodyguards. Now Bassianus-Caracalla had lived 43 years, reigning alone for 6. Translator's note, Caracalla was actually 29 at his death, not 43, so wherever this figure comes from, it was probably just a scribal error. Most of Munster's dates and ages seem to concur pretty well with mainstream history. Okay, moving on. Opilius Macrinus, homo obscurus, malis artibus educatus, quibus et ad praefecturam primum est vectus, et deinde ad imperium. Senatus tamen aurea Bassiani eum libentera cepit, sperans ipsum meteorem futurum. Macrinus vero sciens Antoninorum nomen magni esse momenti, et amable apud milites, iussit filium suum, quoque appellare Antoninum, incitavitque milites ad partos, ut sordes ac infamiam aboleret magnitudine victoriae. Habito conflictu inter emptus est, defecto legionem, quae ad varium Heliogabalum confugerant, quem cognoverant esse filium Antonini Bassiani, oxisus est autem et filius eius, quem Antoninum appellare decreverat. Opilius Macrinus, a man of obscure origin, educated by the base arts, by which he was first elevated to the praetorship, and then eventually to the imperial throne. The Senate, however, owing to their hatred of Bassianus-Caracalla, eagerly accepted him to the reign, hoping that he would rule more leniently. And so Macrinus, knowing that the name of the Antonines carried great weight and was so beloved by the soldiers, ordered that his son also would be called Antoninus, and he incited his forces to Parthia, that he might wipe away the filth and stain of his low name by the greatness of victory. Yet in the ensuing battle he was killed by a defection of his own legions, which had fled to Varius Heliogabalus, whom they had learned was the son of Antonius Bassianus. So he was killed along with his son, whom he had decided to name Antoninus. Antonius varius Heliogabalus stupro ex Antonino genere natus, dum Antonus pater a Macrino interficeretur, fugit ipse in Jovis templum veluti in asylum. Deinde astum matris declaratus est imperator, et oxisus Macrinos a militibus, quibus mater profusas didit largitiones. Nactus itaco imperium nuncios misit Romam, simulque figuram numinis Heliogabali Judaici in tabla pictam, unde ipse Heliogabalus dictus. Seque sanguine Antonini Bassiani genitum denuncians desiderium ingens sui fecit, statimque in senatu princeps appellatus. Ipse primus caesarum fecit mulierem, hoc est matrem suam, in senatu consulum occupare sobelia. Quae simiamira dicta senatus consultus de legibus matronialibus, quo advestium et ornatum tulit plurima et sententiam dixit. Sed cum ipse per cuncta obscurinitatis vitia impurissimus, veluti fus in volutabro sese immergeret, statim milites poenituit, quod in Macrinum conspirasent et hunc principem fecissent, atque ideo consenserunt in Alexandrum consobrinum Heliogabali. Nam Heliogabalus omnes honores dignitates magistratus ac potestates per libidinum ministros administrabat, profanabat sacra populi Romam incestabat vestales virgines, conabator Caligulae et Neronis genera libidinum non modo aequare verum et excellere. Orestam cubitatem condidit et humanas hostias sacrificavit. Cumque ob crudelem vitam omnibus esset in visus, tunc magis in eum ex arset odium militum, cum Alexandrum consobrinum suum, quae Paulum ante adoraptaverat et caesarem fecerat, trucidantum quibustam praecapisset. Et cum nole cum Alexandro in concordiam venire a militibus in latrina, ad quam confugerat interruptus est. Et cum non posset cloaca excipere cadaverum gustum foramen, tractum est per circis pacia more canini cadaveris, et in tuberum tandem objectum, ne umquam sepelli posset. Oxisa est cum eo mater sumramira, cautumque est ne umquam mulier ingrederetur senatum. Putant illum 4 annis tenuisse gubernacula Romanae majestatis. Antoninus Varius Heliogabalus, said to be born of the Antonine lineage out of wedlock, while his father Carcalla was being killed by Macrinus, he fled, taking himself to the temple of Jupiter as if for asylum. Then, by his mother's trick, he was declared emperor among the soldiers, and Macrinus was killed by those soldiers to whom his mother had given lavish gifts. Having therefore obtained the empire in this way, he sent messengers to Rome, at the same time a painted picture of the Jewish sun god on a tablet whence he himself had been called Heliogabalus. He declared himself to be born of the blood of Antonius Bassianus-Caracalla. This created an immense wanting for him in Rome, so he was immediately proclaimed prince in the Senate. He was the first of the Caesars to name a woman, namely his own mother, to occupy a senatorial seat. She, who was called Sumia Mira, called for the first senatorial decrees on laws for matrons as regards their dress and adornment. But when he himself began to defile his life by all means of indecency, immersing himself like a pig in the wallow, his soldiers immediately repented that they had conspired against Macrinus and made him a prince instead. Therefore they agreed to support Alexander, the cousin of Elegabalus. For this Elegabalus had administered all honors, dignities, and magistrates through the most lustful ministers. And instead of worshipping the sacred rites of the people of Rome, he incestuously defiled the Vestal virgins. He attempted not only to equal, but to surpass the lustful prototypes of Caligula and Nero. He's said to have founded the city of Orestes and sacrificed human victims, and since he was hated by all for his cruelty of life, the soldiers' hatred grew even more against him when he ordered them to murder his own cousin Alexander, whom he had adopted just a while earlier and named the next Caesar. And since he couldn't come to terms with his cousin Alexander, he was killed by his soldiers in the latrine to which he had fled. And since the sewers couldn't receive his corpse because of their narrow opening, he was dragged through the streets like the corpse of a dog, and finally thrown into the Tiber so that his corpse could never be buried. His mother, Sumira was killed with him, and precautions were taken that no woman should ever again enter the Senate. It's said that he held the reins of Roman majesty for about 4 years. Alexander consobrinus Heliogabali, matrem scilicet Julia Mamea, sorore Sumiramirae natus, et in litteris ac militare disciplina optime institutus est, ac ob animi virtutis ei nomen Antonini magni datum, ob ingentem autem animi vigorum contra militum insolentiam, severi nomen a militibus inditum est. Recepto enim a senatu Augusti nomine, senatum et equestrem ordinem per purgavit, impuros et infames in aulico ministerio obiecit. Potestates ac magistritus, vendi non est passus, multis civitatibus terrae motu abruptis ad instaurationem pecuniam ac vectigalibus dedit. Pauperum filios publicae aluit, neminemque ab alio damnum ferre permissit, sed omnibus operibus praescripsit illam legem naturae. Quod tibi non vis fieri, alteri non feceris. Et quamquam servissimus est esset in milite, nullum tamen delictum atrocius extimabat quam in furtu, appellant fures rei publicae hostes, cum autem Germanicum bellum immineret, conscripto exercitu ad Gallum profectus est, ubiqua millibus quod severior esset trucidatus a Maximio duce anno aetatis, viginte nona cum imperasset annis tredecim. Alexander Severus, said to be a cousin to Elegabalus, was born to Julia Mamea, a sister of Sumira. and was quite well educated in literature and military discipline. For his mental acuity he was given the name Antonius the Great, but for his great vigor of spirit against the insolence of the troops, he was given the name Severus by the soldiers. For having received the title of Augustus from the Senate, he purged the senatorial and equestrian class, casting out the impure and unpopular from the courtly ministry. He didn't suffer powers and magistrates to be sold. He gave money from taxes to the many cities who'd been recently overwhelmed by earthquakes for reconstruction. He publicly supported the children of the poor. He didn't allow anyone to suffer harm from another, but prescribed the golden law of nature: what you would not want done to you, do not do to another. And although he was quite severe towards his soldiers, yet he despised no crime as more atrocious than theft, calling thieves enemies of the Republic. But when the Germanic War was imminent, he had gathered an army and set out for Gaul, and there, because he put too much faith in his soldiers, he was assassinated by his general Maximius in the 29th year of his life, after having ruled for 13 years.